So this is week 3 of our series, Life Lessons in Lockdown. And I've been asked to share with you guys this week just a couple of things that have been percolating for me over the last 2 months. Just to be out there and honest with you guys, this is take number 9,769. And I'm hoping that we can get through this without me making a complete hash of it. So just so you guys know, the last 2 months for me have been extremely challenging. There have been moments where I have really felt fear and anxiety about whether I would be able to pay my bond, whether I would be able to pay the rent for my offices, and whether I would even be able to put food on the table. In fact, April was probably the worst month that I've had in my practice since I started out in 2010. And one of the questions that I've had to ask myself a lot during this time is that whether I would stay faithful even if the absolute worst should happen. And one of the things that I've come to realize in asking myself that question is that God is still God. That even when I am weak and I stumble and when I blow it, fortunately for me, God is still God and He never changes. And even if the worst should happen, I choose to serve Him. A friend of mine often says that life is a series of waiting rooms. And I guess this lockdown experience is one of those waiting rooms. Now, if you're anything like me, you hate waiting. I certainly hate waiting. If I go to the barber, I don't wait for a particular stylist. Whoever's there and is ready cuts my hair, and if they can't help me right away, I'm out of there. And things like queues, just drive me completely insane. Even thinking about queues makes my palms sweaty. And usually by the time I get to the front of the queue, I'm in such a foul mood that a homicide is imminent. But I always find it quite strange. It's like, how often do you get to the front of the queue and the person behind the counter has got a little poster with Psalm 23 or footprints or something like that stuck up on the wall, and I have to kind of swallow all of the murderous thoughts that I'm thinking and remind myself that I have an opportunity in that moment for God's kingdom to come and to give the person behind the counter the respect and the due that they deserve. But that's the thing about these waiting rooms. I know that for myself, that if I let them, these waiting rooms can rob me of my humanity and cause me to lash out at the people around me. And so I have to confess that my wife and kids for the last 2 months have had to put up with the grumpiest oak in Benoni. They deserve a flippin' medal. They seem to be willing to give me another chance though, and fortunately for me, so does God. And all I can do in that situation is thank them for their grace and hope that I can do better. There are 2 gifts that I've discovered in this waiting room as well. The one of them I was reminded the other evening when I was outside in my garden. It was one of those evenings where the usual sound of the cars just weren't there. It was completely still. I couldn't even hear the TV in the lounge. I can't remember a time actually when my neighborhood has been that quiet. It was in the evening after I put the kids to bed. And just in that moment, I remembered the gift of silence. And for me, the silence is where I really get close to God. There's nothing to hide behind in the silence. Not my phone, not the busyness of my day, not even my Bible. I'm a bit of a head person, and so when I'm reading a Bible text, I like to analyze it and get out my concordance and start studying it and really seek to understand the verse. And sometimes I find actually that in doing that, I'm halfway through that exercise and I realize that I missed the point, that the text and the words have actually become more important than spending that time in relationship with the living God. And so in the silence, I find that there are absolutely no distractions. Mother Teresa was once asked by Dan Rather of CBS what she did when she prayed. And she answered simply by saying, "I just listen." Dan was a bit confused by that answer, and so he asked Mother Teresa what she thought that God did during that time. To which she replied, "He just listens." And that brings me to the second gift that I've found in this waiting room, and that's the gift of listening. I can say without reservation that probably every meaningful relationship that I've ever had in my life has at its root the fact that somebody has given me the gift of listening. They've taken the time and the effort to really just listen to what I have to say. Whenever I think of listening, I'm reminded of Jesus' encounter with the Samaritan woman in John 4, where he starts off a conversation with the woman just with a simple question: "Will you give me a drink?" I'm quite sure if you read that text that this woman was expecting Jesus to judge her, but he never does. I wonder how many people had taken the time to find out about her life and her story, or even talk to her before Jesus did. Whenever I speak about listening, I always have to say a big thanks to my Kirsty, who has given me the gift of listening for more than 10 years now. How she puts up with me, I will never ever know. She deserves a medal. I learned a little bit about listening again about 2 years ago on St. Patrick's Day, when my brother was admitted to the intensive care unit of the Mill Park Hospital. I went to go and visit him as often as I could, pretty much every day. And mostly, there was always somebody around: nurses, physios, other family members, friends that had dropped in to visit. But every now and again, it would be just the two of us. And sometimes the painkillers that he was on would knock him out. And I would just sit there at his bedside, in the quiet, listening. If I think back to that time, I can picture it so clearly, how the only sounds would be the beeping of the machines that he was hooked up to, the nurses at the nurses' stations whispering about their day, the sounds of the patients shifting restlessly. But other than that, it was quiet. And I just sat there listening, hoping that he would wake up and say something. Pretty much anything. I didn't really care what it was that he had to say. And to be perfectly honest, most of the time when he did wake up, what he said was massively underwhelming. Things like, "How long have you been there?" or, "Yes, bud, you need to shave." But I didn't care. I was just happy to hear him speak. And I think that sometimes God comes alongside of us in our waiting rooms, without us even knowing it, just to listen, because he loves us. So some of the problems that we're facing at this point in time are huge. It's really bleak out there. And I can feel powerless to do anything, but then I remember that at the very least, it's in my power to listen. Not to try and fix people or to change their situation, but really just to take the time and the effort to listen to their stories. Darren and Michelle shared last week about deep and meaningful conversations. And if you want to have a deep and meaningful conversation, I have to look at how I listen, because listening is the key to those conversations. So in the story of the Samaritan woman, Jesus eventually reveals that he is the Messiah, and the Samaritan woman leaves that place to tell everybody that she can find about her experience. But before Jesus reveals the truth, he listens. And I think that makes all the difference. And so those are the life lessons that I've learned during this last lockdown. I have to remember that God is still God, even when things don't work out the way that I was hoping that they would. I have to remember that I can't allow my time in the waiting room to rob me of my humanity. I have to try and find a few moments in silence with God. And lastly, I have to listen.